Hey, welcome back to Aprons On, everybody. As promised, this week we're going to be making creme brulee. Really simple, this one. And if you think about it as baked custard and not creme brulee, then it's going to be a whole lot less intimidating. So we've got a dozen eggs, dozen large eggs, 50 grams or half a cup of sugar, a quart, roughly a litre of heavy cream, some vanilla essence, and I've got these are 6-ounce ramekins. They're 4 inches across. This just happens to work the best for the amount of eggs and cream that I'm going to be using. So you don't have to use these. You can use like little coffee cups, or as long as it's oven proof, because it is going to go in the oven. So let's get stuck in. Right, the first thing we're going to do then is get our cream warming up. And if you've got a pan with a nice thick base, that's preferable, but any pan or saucepan is going to work, preferably wider. Now I am going to add 1 cup of milk to mine. The only reason I'm doing that is because the size of my ramekins, there's 6 of them, and I'll come up a little bit short because I want them all to be about the same size. But that's not necessary if you've got smaller ramekins, or you want to make half the amount. Of course, you'll just adjust that as you go. And we're going to add 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla essence. This stuff is really pretty strong, and a lot of recipes will call for 2. For my individual taste, that's a little bit too strong of a vanilla flavor, so I just go with 1. So let's give that a little stir and get that onto a low heat. Make sure it is a low heat as well, because we're going to crack our eggs while this is warming up, and the last thing you want is for this to boil over, because it makes a heck of a mess. So let's get on with our eggs, because we're going to do something different with the eggs. I'll show you. So with our eggs, we're not actually using the whole egg, we're just going to use the yolks. So I like to work from right to left, so your eggs, your egg whites, your egg yolks. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. I'll show you both of them. The first way, and probably the easiest if you're new to cooking, is just grab a small bowl, crack your egg, and you'll find, don't crack it on the edge of a saucepan, because then you risk getting little pieces of shell in with your yolks. You'll find that the shell will break in a cleaner 2 halves if you just tap it on its side, and then you can just get your thumbs in there, crack the whole egg into your little dish like that, throw them in there, and then you're going to take the whole egg and just pour it through your fingers. Just slightly open your fingers like that, and you'll see the white is just dropping through your fingers. Try and get that stringy bit there. So you can do it like that. So the other way, same routine as before. Crack it on its side till you get a little divot, stick your thumbs in, break the egg into 2 halves, and then you're just going to gently tip the yolk from one to the other. So one more time then. Crack the shell. Let the white just fall out. And if your whole egg drops in the white, no big deal, you can fish it out with half of the shell. What you should be left with are your dozen egg yolks and your dozen egg whites. The egg whites we can use for egg white omelettes or meringues if you want to do that. So we're just going to add a little bit of this powdered sugar to our bowl. Just break these yolks up. Now all you want to do is break these yolks up. You're not whisking it, so just keep adding your powdered sugar. Don't worry if you've got a few little lumps of sugar in there, because once you add the hot cream, they'll all dissolve. Okay, we got our sugar in the eggs. Now we can go back over to the stove Turn this heat up to a medium heat. It's been sitting on a low heat now for the last 5 minutes, so it shouldn't take too long. You don't need to boil this. All you're needing to do is just get it to just start to simmer, and then we'll take the heat off. So while the cream is warming up, we can set our oven to 325 Fahrenheit, which is 163, 160 is close enough, Celsius, or gas mark 3. And you'll want your shelf in the middle of the oven. So our cream is ready, just at the point of starting to simmer. So we can shut the heat off on there. Carefully take this over to the countertop. And depending on whether you're left-handed or right-handed, depends on how you want to arrange your bowls here. But we're going to use a technique called tempering. If we were to pour all of this hot cream straight onto the eggs, it's going to cook them instantly, and you'll just have a big bowl of scrambled eggs. So to temper it, take a ladle, one ladle, and then add that to the eggs while you're whisking. And do that 3 or 4 times. Then you don't shock the egg with this massive amount of heat that's going to cook them in the bowl. We don't want that. Once you've got 3 or 4, then you can dispense with your ladle and just pour the rest of your cream in, stirring at the same time. Okay, so that's that. Now the next thing I always do is take a sieve and a bowl that you can pour out of really easily. This is what we're going to fill our ramekins from. And we're just going to pour this through the sieve just to strain it. And the job's a good one. All right, at this point, you want to fill your kettle and get a whole kettle of water going. Right, while the old kettle's boiling, grab yourself a deep-sided old baking tray, roasting tin, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to place our ramekins in there. This is going to serve as our bain-marie, which I'm sure the name comes from something to do with Marie Antoinette, as a lot of French culinary terms seem to. But basically, it's just a water bath. And the reason you use a water bath is it just cooks the custard really gently and nice and slowly and evenly. So we will fill the ramekins first, and then after we've put this tray in the oven, then we'll add the boiling water after the kettle's boiled. Now you may notice that you've got a ton of bubbles on top of your custard, and you really want to get rid of those before you put them into the ramekins, because it will mean you won't get a nice smooth surface on the top of the custard when it's cooked. And I've seen recipes say you need to skim that off. The easiest way of doing this, frankly, you're going to use a torch anyway to brown the sugar. Just get your little kitchen torch going. So just run around the custard, not really close, you don't want to burn the cream, and it'll just pop those bubbles. It works really great. So while we're on the subject of torches, you can pick up these little kitchen torches, portable butane ones at Walmart. This was $15. You can buy more expensive culinary ones, which if you were working in a professional kitchen, I'm sure you'd buy a better one than this. But for 15 bucks, and I probably make creme brulees 6 times a year is all. But for years, I just used one of these, just a plumber's torch. They work just as well. You just have to be a bit careful with the heat, because there's a lot more heat coming out of this than there is with this. All right, let's get our custard then poured into our ramekins. Just pour it in gently so you don't make a ton of bubbles. And if you do have bubbles on this, you can use the torch method again just to pop them. Right, there you can see, look, we've got a few little bubbles. So all we need to do is take the torch. You don't have to get very close. And it just pops them and you get a nice smooth surface to your custard. Okay, let's get these in the oven then. Now, I would highly recommend, rather than pulling the shelf out and placing them on, place your tray on the shelf. Because if you try to push the shelf back in, it will grab the sides of the oven and it will be a jerky motion and you run the risk of getting water in your custard. If your custard spills over the edge and gets in the water, no big deal. So just fill until you're about 2/3 up the side of the ramekins. Gently push that back in and set your timer for 30 minutes. So that's it for the next 20-30 minutes. We'll check it in 20 minutes, see how it's coming along. But while it's sitting in the oven getting happy there, we'll have a little trivia lesson. How about that? I did some digging around on the interweb, as you do, and this is actually a really old recipe. Creme brulee, or burnt cream, literally translated, first showed up in a recipe book in France in 1691 for chefs that served the nobility and the royal court. So it was a pretty fancy dish. There's some debate as far as how it came about. We won't get into that. But it's a nice treat, and if you follow the steps that I've laid out, especially the tempering part, you really shouldn't have too much trouble. So there you go, that was 25 minutes, and they've got just a nice little jiggle. Now they need to cool down. So once this is cooled down enough for you to handle it, just gently, don't drip water on top of your custards. Just pull these out onto a cooling rack. And then once they've cooled down to room temperature, you can pop them in the fridge. Now ideally, you want to cover these with some cling film, or if you can slide them in a big Ziploc bag or something, and put them in the fridge overnight. They'll continue to set more as they cool down. You can actually make them and leave them at this stage for 3 or 4 days ahead of time, but you must make sure they're covered. Okay, I've had these on chill now for a couple of hours, and this is the bit I think that people are most intimidated by, is how you get that nice caramelized sugar on top. About a teaspoon and a half of sugar. Kind of have to, this is going to vary obviously with the size of your ramekin. You can use your spoon also just to get it a bit even. Light your torch, not too close, and just keep it moving about. First thing you'll notice is the sugar melts into these little balls. It will do that first before it starts to make a crust. Obviously these are cold, they've been in the fridge, so you don't want to play the flame against the porcelain for a prolonged period, because then you'll risk cracking it. But you just take your time, and you want to get it a nice brown, not too burnt, although I quite like it personally, really dark, because I like that bitterness. And that's it. You can go darker than that if you want. If you get it too dark though and you burn it, then your sugar is going to lose some of its sweetness and it's going to get a little bitter. So there you go then. 3 pretty simple but quite sophisticated little creme brulees with that nice caramelized top. They're simple to make. Give them a go. If they don't come out absolutely perfect the first time, it doesn't matter. You've still got a really lovely, delicious custard underneath. Now, when you put the sugar on to make the crust, do that right before you're going to serve them, because if you do it too early, then the moisture in the custard underneath will start to soften the caramelized sugar on the top, and you really can't bring it back. You can't hit it with the torch again to try and crisp it back up. It just won't work. So that does it for today then. Thank you so much for watching. And if you have enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you'll be sure and know when there's a new video out. So next week, I think we're going to explore some Cajun flavors. So I'll see you then. Have a great week. Cheers.